the beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God, is the first line of the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament. Now, in yesterday's video, we saw how Jesus told his followers that the whole of the Old Testament, the part of the Bible written before Jesus was born, was actually all about him. Now, the fact that we refer to him as Jesus Christ means that shouldn't come as a surprise to us. But it does come as a surprise to us because we don't realise that Christ isn't Jesus' surname, it's actually his job title. And the job description for the Christ is set out in the Old Testament. Now, the New Testament was originally written in Greek, and the English word Christ comes from the Greek word Christos. And Christos itself is a translation of a Hebrew word that in English is Messiah. And did you notice that's one of the words in the first line of Mark's Gospel? The beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. And in the Bible I'm reading from, there's a footnote next to the phrase Jesus the Messiah. It says, or Jesus Christ. Messiah, Hebrew, and Christ, Greek, both mean anointed one. So we know that Christ isn't Jesus' surname, it's his job title. We know that the word Christ and Messiah both mean anointed one. But what does anointed one mean? Well, understanding the meaning of anointed one really helps us to understand what Jesus' job description actually was. And strange as it might sound, anointed one simply means someone who has had oil poured onto their head. In the Old Testament, when God chose the first king of the nation of Israel, he sent a prophet to the man he had chosen and told him to pour oil onto his head to show that he was the one that God had chosen to be the king. So literally, anointed one, Christ, Messiah, simply means someone who's had oil poured on their head. But functionally, anointed one, Christ, Messiah, means God's chosen king, the man God has chosen to rule on his behalf. So, in one sense, every king in the Old Testament was a Christ or a Messiah. But in the Old Testament, God promised that there would be a special Christ, one who would rule forever. And that's a promise that God made to Israel's second king, King David. King David had brought political security and stability to the nation of Israel, and he wanted to honour God by building a house or a temple for him in Jerusalem. But God said no, because God himself was going to build a house or a family for David. And that's a promise that God gives to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7. I'll read part of that to you, and you'll see there's a bit of a wordplay going on with the word house, which can either mean a physical building or it can mean a family or a line of descendants. So this is what God says to King David. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. I don't know if you picked up all of the details of the promise, but there's a few details there. So David isn't going to build a house or a temple for God. God is going to build a house or a family for David. One of David's sons is going to build a temple for God. That son will have a kingdom that will last forever, And this son of David will also be called the Son of God. Well, David did have a son, and he had many sons, but one of his sons was called Solomon. And he did build a temple for God in Jerusalem. But his kingdom didn't last forever. He died, his kingdom was split in half, and eventually the temple he had built was destroyed. But God had made a promise, and so the people of Israel came to expect that there would be another son of David who would rule forever, who would build a better temple, and who would be known as the Son of God. So in one sense, every king of Israel was an anointed one, a Christ. But the people of Israel were looking forward to the Christ, the one God had promised who would rule forever. And there were lots of promises or prophecies about what the Christ was going to do, set out in the Old Testament. But essentially, the Christ was God's chosen king, the man God had chosen to rule forever, to save God's people, to destroy God's enemies, and to bring justice to the world. And at the beginning of Mark's Gospel, we're told that this man is Jesus Christ. The beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus isn't just talked about in the Old Testament. He's its main theme and the climax of everything that was promised. And just as there were many Christs who paved the way for the Christ, so too there were many sons of God who paved the way and pointed to the Son of God. In fact, Son of God is a title that was given to the nation of Israel as a whole. When the Israelites were slaves in the land of Egypt, God sent Moses to the king of Egypt and told him to say these words: Israel is my firstborn son. Let my son go, so that he may worship me. So Israel as a whole was referred to as a son of God. And King David, who we've already looked at, he was referred to as the Son of God. But God promised that one of his descendants, the Christ, would be the ultimate Son of God. And this too is Jesus Christ, the unique Son of God, fully man and God's chosen King, and fully God, God the Son, come from heaven to earth to live as a man and to show us what God is like. The beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God.